positional debating basically means that you are not just throwing out a collection of arguments or a collection of cards, which is what a lot of people do, but rather that you are debating something that you personally identify with or personally believe in. And so, first thing that I want to have you do is I want you to click on this link right here, or if the link doesn't work, you might need to copy it and paste it, and do a new tab. And by the way, you're probably going to need to type some things into the handout that you downloaded, so you might just want to save that separately. Okay, so if you do this, if you go to this website right here, it is a political topology quiz. It's trying to figure out where you are on the political spectrum. And so I'd like you to begin the quiz right here. And as you go through each question, I would like, if you don't mind, I'd like one person in here to tell me what their answers are. Everyone else can do their own answers, but I want to go through one person in particular. Yeah, back here. What's your name?
Josie.
Josie. All right, so Josie, the first question, the rest of you can kind of do your own answers as we go. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Government regulation of business is necessary to protect the public interest, or government regulation of business usually does more harm than good?
The first one.
First one. Nifty, so we're going to select that. Which of the following statements comes closest to your view? Most people who want to get ahead can make it if they're willing to work hard, or hard work and determination are no guarantee of success for most people?
The second one.
This country should do whatever it takes to protect the environment, or this country has gone too far in its efforts to protect the environment?
The first one.
Using overwhelming military force is the best way to defeat terrorism around the world, or relying too much on military force to defeat terrorism creates hatred that leads to more terrorism?
The second one.
I'm feeling I can predict some of these answers. Racial discrimination is the main reason why many black people can't get ahead these days, or blacks who can't get ahead in this country are mostly responsible for their own condition?
The first one.
Business corporations make too much profit. Most corporations make a fair and reasonable amount of profit?
The first one.
Poor people today have it easy because they can get government benefits without doing anything in return. Poor people have hard lives because government benefits don't go far enough to help them live decently?
The second one.
It's best for the future of our country to be active in world affairs, or we should pay less attention to problems overseas and concentrate on problems here at home? The second one?
Yep.
All right. It is not necessary to believe in God in order to be moral and have good values, or it is necessary to believe in God in order to be moral and have good values?
The first one.
The growing number of newcomers from other countries threatens traditional American customs and values. The growing number of newcomers from other countries strengthens American society?
The second one.
Government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. Government often does a better job than people give it credit for?
The second one.
Society is better off if people make marriage and make marriage and having children a priority, or society is just as well off if people have priorities other than marriage and children?
The second one.
Too much power is concentrated in the hands of a few large companies, or the largest companies do not have too much power?
The first one.
The best way to ensure peace is through military strength. Good diplomacy is the best way to ensure peace?
Second one.
Success in life is pretty much determined by forces outside of our control. Everyone has it in their own power to succeed?
The first one.
Homosexuality should be accepted by society. Homosexuality should be discouraged by society?
The first one.
Americans need to be willing to give up privacy and freedom in order to be safe from terrorism. Americans shouldn't have to give up privacy and freedom in order to be safe from terrorism?
The second one.
Government aid to the poor does more harm than good by making people too dependent on government assistance. Government aid to the poor does more harm than good. Does more good than harm because people can't get out of poverty until their basic needs are met.
The second one.
Stricter environmental laws and regulations cost too many jobs and hurt the economy. Stricter environmental laws and regulations are worth the cost.
The second one.
Our country has made the changes needed to give blacks equal rights with whites. Our country needs to continue making changes to give blacks equal rights with whites.
The second one.
U.S. efforts to solve problems around the world usually end up making things worse. Problems in the world would be even worse without U.S. involvement.
The first one.
Okay, we're almost at the end here. Government should do more to help needy Americans, even if it means going deeper into debt. The government today can't afford to do much more to help the needy.
The first one.
And last one. Immigrants today strengthen our country because of their hard work and talents. Immigrants today are a burden on our country because they take our jobs, housing, and health care.
The first one.
Okay. Now, before I click that in, where does Josie fall, do you think, on the political spectrum?
Green.
Right here?
Me?
What?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, solid, I would guess solid liberal.
Solid liberal?
Extremely liberal.
Extremely liberal. Someone said Green Party. We're going to find out.
I wouldn't go that far.
Josie is a solid liberal along with 15% of the public. And you can see some more information over here about how she answered versus maybe how other solid liberals answered. So it looks like the vast majority of some of these, some people who answered these questions and were solid liberals, she was consistent with. So let me ask for other people, so you did your own responses here, and you can keep going down and sort of see more information over here. How many people got the same result as Josie? Okay, a lot of people did. How many people, those of you who got different results, what did you get?
Young outsider.
Young outsider.
Young outsider. Interesting. What does that say? Like, what's the description?
You're a skeptic of activist government. You believe it's wasteful and inefficient, and you lean more towards the Republican Party, but you are more divergent from the two groups.
Interesting. And you both got that.
And
Did anyone get something different? Yep.
I got business conservative.
Interesting. What did that say?
You're the traditional like small government Republicans, except for they believe in Wall Street and have a positive attitude toward businesses and immigrants.
Very interesting. So there's quite a lot here. Now this says for the rest of you, generally affluent and highly educated, most solid liberals strongly support the social safety net and take very liberal positions on virtually all issues. Most say they always vote Democratic and are unflagging supporters of Barack Obama. Overall, solid liberals are very optimistic about the nation's future and are the most likely to say that America's success is linked to its ability to change rather than its reliance on long-standing principles. On foreign policy, solid liberals overwhelmingly believe that good diplomacy rather than military strength is the best way to ensure peace. So for those of you who got this result, how accurately would you say that reflects your views? Incredibly? Somewhat?
yes,
Somewhat. Where do you see a difference between what this says and what you believe?
Probably on the good diplomacy. Like, I wouldn't say I'm like extreme good diplomacy, but I'm not like, I'm more in the middle, I guess.
Between military and diplomacy?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
I would say that there are issues that Barack Obama supports that I would be further left than him on.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right. But I also believe that there are certain questions that were asked where I was more in the middle and there wasn't really that option, or that I thought there needed to be more explanation.
Yeah, that's actually a criticism a lot of people have of this particular quiz, is that it doesn't really give you a third option. There are lots of other ones, though, like there's the I Stand With one. I don't know if any of you have seen that, where it, and if not, I can send it to you later, where it asks you to answer a bunch of questions, but it gives you like a lot of in-between answers, and it's supposed to determine like which presidential candidate or potential candidate you seem to be closest to. So I'm going to guess most of you who got this result are going to be on the like Bernie Sanders side of things, but I don't know for sure. we can find out later. Okay, so why are you doing this / what is the point? The point of this is to determine what your political orientation is. And so I want to kind of go back into this handout and give you a sense of what we're looking at. I don't know how many of you in here are like super into political issues, the political spectrum. How many of you are like really into politics, sort of follow it all the time? Oh, quite a few people. Oh, that's great. If you are, then you probably are already familiar with some of the terms over here. But just so that we have sort of a general sense of where people are with these terms, what is a socialist? What might be like socialist beliefs? Yeah.
Like the government helping out, like welfare and other things like that.
Okay, so this could be, and I think maybe even more than that, right?
I'd say like inequality on the economic street level.
Okay, so some might say sort of extreme. Can you all see this? Should I make it bigger? Okay, so some sort of extreme equality. In some cases, and some of this is debatable, but like the whole notion of private property might be questioned. So it's not really clear that people who would identify as socialists believe in private property. I don't know if there are people in here. Does anyone in here, like, would anyone in here describe themselves as a socialist? Maybe, not sure. What about progressive? How many people would identify themselves that way in here as a progressive? Kind of, maybe. Not sure. What is a progressive?
I think it's someone who, I guess, isn't content with the status quo, so they're looking for change. They want progress. I mean, that's kind of what in the name, I guess.
Sure. So, constantly challenging the status quo. This is often something said about like K-debaters or people who identify as like critical people, is that they're constantly criticized, right? Because they think there's always more that should be done in a certain area. What about liberal? Mm-hmm. That's more you. What is a liberal? And obviously these are very like broad, general descriptions, a lot more nuanced than what we're putting here. But that's a term that gets thrown around a
They
lot.
tend to agree with things like minority rights, immigration reform. They try to promote equality.
And kind of like an overarching government.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to skip the moderate left and moderate right for a moment, but let's go to libertarian. Yep. I'll start here and then I'll go here.
It's someone who believes in absolutely very little governmental control, and they believe that the only purpose of the government is to protect the citizens.
Okay. So we have sort of minimal state, minimal government, which we'll talk about a little more. And then what about conservative? Oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something else on
Yeah, I
libertarian?
was going to add they're firm believers in property rights and property rights and people I'm trying to remember the term, sorry. Self-government
Sure, absolutely.
and individual freedom.
Good. And how is that different from being a conservative? In some cases, it may not be different. Yep.
Do conservatives believe that government should have more input on social issues?
Yes. Good. So, more gov input on social issues. Sorry if that totally screwed up everything here. But, yeah. So, there is some overlap between both liberals and libertarians, and then libertarians and conservatives, but you're absolutely right. More government control on social issues, less government control on fiscal issues. Okay. So, if I were to sort of break down, again, like this very, very, simple, and Tea Partier is probably like further right than very strongly in favor of government input on social issues, sort of government sense of morality. So if I were to sort of generalize the central positions for these groups, I would say with liberals, it's active government involvement on fiscal issues. So things like welfare or job creation or infrastructure or education or healthcare, fiscal issues slash, I guess, like meeting people's needs, right? That there are sort of public options in all of those areas. But minimal government involvement on social issues. So things like sexuality or drug use or abortion. Those are all social issues where liberals would say they don't want the government involved, right? And then in addition to that, a lot of due process protection for those accused of crimes. So something that's very interesting about liberal positions is that in some cases they really sort of trust in government. When it comes to things like welfare, education, etc., they want a very active government. But when it comes to things like criminal justice, they tend to be much more on the defense side rather than on the prosecution side. They tend to have a very strong belief in individual privacy rights, for example, and sort of procedure for anything the government does. And so in some cases, they really distrust the state. In other cases, they trust the state a lot. Libertarians are probably just going to be like minimal government for everything. So that's both sort of fiscal and social issues. Don't have the government in my wallet, don't have the government in my bedroom, don't have the government around, right? Minimize, minimize, minimize. Conservatives are going to say active government involvement on social issues. So the government should legislate on gay marriage, and if the government feels like it doesn't want people to marry if they identify as gay, the government has the right to do that. If you're conservative, you may have that belief, right? Abortion, drug use, those things can and should be illegal. There's a much greater role for religion. Many people who identify as conservative would say the United States is a Christian nation. It was founded on principles of Christianity, and it needs to stay that way. We need to uphold religious traditions. But at the same time, there is minimal government involvement on fiscal issues. So individuals have property rights. If you make money, you have the right to keep that money. It is not anybody else's property. It is your property. So there should not be a lot of welfare, a lot of government health care. Those things should really be privatized rather than being seen as public goods. And so you see sort of the same tension here as we see with liberals, which is there is much trust in government on social issues, very little trust on fiscal issues. Okay, so why are we going through all of this? Because I think that the best way to debate is to do so from a defined position. Now, obviously, it's a bit more complex and nuanced than what you're seeing up here. But I think you need to know where you stand on the issues in order to be a good debater and have a good advocacy. So what I want to talk about is sort of how to use debate to be an advocate for something. And I want to do it specifically by taking a look at first some of the topic areas for next year's topics or topic possibilities. And then I want to talk about just in general how to be a positional debater. So I've bolded a few of these topics over here that are possibilities for next year. I want to talk about at least a couple of these just very briefly. Let's take this one right here. Corporations ought to value their responsibility to shareholders over the public interest when the two conflict. This is a topic that seems to have a very pronounced conservative side and very pronounced liberal side. What's the conservative side?
The affirmative.
Probably the affirmative. Good. And why?
Because it's showing how they value their responsibility to their shareholders, so limited government intervention.
Okay, absolutely. And sorry, back here, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, same, but I would extrapolate and say, I would say that it's also because it's a matter of fiscal responsibility. The shareholders invested the money, and they're the ones who put the time into the business. The business needs to respond in kind.
Right. So this is sort of a reciprocal relationship. Shareholders invested the money, so they deserve priority in what the business does, right? And the most important thing on that side, at least initially it seems like, the most important thing that a business can do is pay back the people who invested in it, right? So that seems pretty straightforward. The neg seems more liberal. So what's sort of the crux of what you think the negative position would be? What's the negative really trying to say? Yep.
Majority first.
Okay. So society or social interests trump financial interests. So in other words, all individuals have to be responsible for the larger community, right? So if a business is like polluting the environment, or if a business is underpaying workers, or if a business is engaged in some other practice that's deceptive or harming the public in some way, the public needs to come first, right? So this seems to be, at first glance, what the topic is really about. So my question is, if you identify as a conservative, how are you going to negate this topic? And if you identify as a liberal, how are you going to affirm this topic? I will tell you what most people do, and then I'm going to tell you what I would advise you to do. Most people are going to go, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think more people in the debate community tend to be more liberal or libertarian than conservative, right? So lots of debaters are going to go, I just don't believe that the app is true. So I'm going to run some super tricky, super sketchy position that doesn't really say anything, because at least then I'm not making an argument that defends the topic, right? Most people, when it's a topic that they don't believe is true, are like, I'm going to run T in theory, because I don't really believe in the topic, or I don't believe in the negative side. I don't think that that's actually a good approach, in my opinion. I think that you, as an advocate for whatever position you believe in, need to make substantive arguments on the side that is whatever side you were assigned, but defending the beliefs that you have. In other words, I think that if you are a conservative, then you should make conservative arguments when you negate. And I think if you are a liberal, then you should make liberal arguments when you affirm. So let's talk about how you would do that. So those of you who identify as liberal, I want you to tell me what you think you could possibly do to affirm this topic. What are some concerns that you have, or some issues that you think are important that could be addressed by the affirmative? Yeah, Dave.
I think another strat to go would be saying something like, if they value their responsibility to shareholders, that means shareholders will continue to make money. Thus, the flow of tax will continue to come in, and we'll be able to put that into public interest.
Great. Okay.
So we have to agree on this.
Sure. So some possible, so I'm going to say sort of like liberal approaches to the app. So one of these is shareholders making money leads to, taxation, more tax revenue from businesses, leads to greater resources for the public. Okay, so that's one potential approach you could take, definitely. What else could you talk about if you had sort of liberal concern? Yeah.
You could talk about, by investing in the interests of the shareholders, the corporations are distributing their power so that it's not all so centrally located.
That's an interesting argument. So you have sort of less power concentrated in a few hands. And so you actually almost have a check on corporate interests when you firm. Good. What else? And we're going to do the same thing for the neg as well, just for the other political side. What else can you do if, what are other issues that you might find important if you identify as a liberal that you think you could potentially address if corporations are putting more valuing responsibility to shareholders more? So think some more along the lines of that first approach, right? About how shareholders making more money is going to mean the business is more successful. What are other things that you can do with a successful business, or what are other things that a successful business can provide to the community or to the society? Yeah,
It could donate to charity.
okay, so definitely could do that. What else?
Create
Provide
jobs.
service programs.
Create jobs. I'm sorry, what?
Service programs.
Sure. Donate to charity, create service programs. Okay, so you can talk about how successful businesses do these things, and what are some communities that might actually need jobs to be created? Yeah, Dave.
I would
Oh, okay. I thought you were. All right. What might be like a community that, or a type of community that might need job creation or job growth? A poor community. Okay. Yes. So.
What answer is going?
So sure, like maybe businesses, do some things that aren't great, right? But employment is really important. Making money is really important. So we want to have that happen, right? Are these arguments like 100% perfect? I mean, maybe not at first glance, but you can still do something with these ideas that allows you to affirm without arguing something that you don't really believe in, right? Similarly, if you identify as a conservative, what might be something that would meet your ideological needs on the neg? So you're going to say social interest first. Yep.
By catering to the customers, you are increasing the customer happiness, which in turn that will spread the word about how your business caters to the customers, increasing popularity, increasing revenue, increasing cash flow.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say the customers. I would say the public in general. It creates good PR. It leads to more money overall, more success, right? We see this all the time. Businesses go out into society and do things all the time in order to generate more business. And it's a good business move if you have your name in the papers because you did something nice for society. Okay, good. What else? If you are prioritizing social interests, what are some things you're maybe not doing? Like, what are some things that harm society that businesses get in trouble for a lot?
Abusing workers.
Sure, abusing workers, or like polluting the environment, right? Or using fraud of some kind, right? So businesses that change bad policies avoid getting sued or getting shut down. And so it's sort of like a method of keeping the business intact, right? Because businesses, when they get in trouble and they do things that are harmful to society, often get caught, and that's generally not good for the business, right? What else can you say from a more conservative perspective about why it's important to prioritize social needs? What else is it going to do if your business has like a good reputation?
Customers.
Okay, so sure, you could say good reputation leads to more customers / more people want to work for or support the business.
And at least the greater influence.
Sure. in doing this is just to have you see that whichever side you are on politically, there are arguments that you can make in favor of that side, right? And so I want to just take a few minutes to branch out from that. Unfortunately, for right now, we probably don't have time to do this with the other topics, but I wanted to do that just to give you a general sense of what you can do. If we have time, maybe at the very end, we can touch back on the topic you guys are doing, the gun ban topic. But for right now, I just want to move forward a little bit. I just want to touch on a few other things. What I'll do is, I know we started kind of late. I do want to go through as much of this as I can within the next 10 minutes or so. I know we're coming close to the 4:30 mark here, so if you want to leave to get dinner, it's totally fine. So you can just get up and leave whenever. I'm going to just keep going for about 10 to 15 more minutes because I want to get through as much of this as possible.
It'll be on YouTube as well.
Awesome. All right, so what does it mean to affirm? One thing that, one area in which I disagree with many people in the debate community is as follows. A lot of people in the debate community will tell you that it means, well, let me ask you first, what does it mean to affirm a topic? What do you think? Yeah, right here.
To uphold the the plan outlined in the resolution.
Okay, to uphold a plan, possibly. Yep.
To prove the plan or its worth.
Okay, so to prove, they may not be right,
No,
but to prove the topic.
Yeah, that's what I meant. To prove the topic's worth.
To prove the topic's worth. Okay. Yep.
To believe in the topic, to believe in the topic in whatever form that's being asked, that needs to be true.
To believe in the topic. Okay. So we have very different responses even in this room, which is interesting to see. Many people in the debate community are going to use this first definition. They're going to say to declare positively, I think the second part of this, to assert to be true, right? If you look at the second example, a document affirming that each student has completed the course. Many people in the world of debate believe that when you say I affirm, that means you are going to prove something to be scientifically or mathematically true, like 1 + 1 = 2, right? That's a true statement. Or, my last name is Hertzig. That is a true statement. It is empirically verifiable. You can look it up. That's a true statement, right? That is the approach many people in debate hold. I do not hold that view. I believe that to affirm is to declare support for or belief in, which is kind of what David was saying. In other words, I think that when you say I affirm a statement, you are presenting an advocacy. You are saying, this is something that I believe to be true, but not in a scientific or mathematical sense. This is what I advocate for. So, in my opinion, your burden as the affirmative is not to prove something true, but instead to give reasons to support that thing. Yep.
So almost I feel like the second one, if you apply it, could bring more kind of a performance debate to it. More if you were to go from that point of view, it opens up instead of focusing, I guess, on policy-oriented arguments. It focuses more on critical arguments.
Sure. I think you can still make policy-oriented arguments under this conception, but I think that this invalidates negative approaches like SCEP, right? So if somebody gets up and says, well, morality doesn't exist, or justice doesn't exist, or, there are too many conceptions of these concepts, so what do we do? My answer to that is, it is not my burden to prove that those things exist. I don't have to prove that those things are true. I just have to give you reasons to endorse that advocacy, right? So if there's a truth testing type neg position, I would say that is inapplicable to what I'm doing as the affirmative, right? So if you're running a plan, for example, I think that's totally fine as long as you are giving reasons to endorse or advocate for that plan. So just real quick, I want to use that to kind of guide us through the last little piece over here and sort of link that back to what we were talking about earlier. Okay, what is positional debating? Positional debating means that you are debating from an overall position or advocacy. It means that you are not trying to prove the resolution true or false, instead you are giving reasons to support or reject the topic, right? So, positional debating also means that you have an identifiable thesis in your case. It means that the case, the entire case, is not just a collection of cards, but is instead a holistic position. So I'll explain to you a little more what that means in 1 second. Let me give you an example. I think that the case revolves around a sort of general philosophy or idea that you believe in, regardless of the topic itself. Let me explain what I mean by that. Let's say that I am on this topic, the gun ban topic. Let's say that I am arguing that a gun ban is good because it creates a more, a more democratic society where people are engaging each other in discourse. Somebody in our lab is running this, that's why I'm talking about it. People engage each other in discourse and are not using coercion or violence to try to talk to other people, right? So it's good for democratic discourse. So I would say something like, in the case, I would say something like, my thesis is that democracy requires discourse rather than violence. By promoting open discussion instead of coercion, gun bans uphold the deliberative process. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm giving you a general statement that I believe to be true, if I'm running this, right? That could be true in any topic, right? Could be true. It's a statement that doesn't depend on the topic itself. I can make this argument regardless of what topic I'm talking about. And what I'm saying is that a gun ban does something to promote this thing that I believe in. So all the arguments in my case are going to be reasons why a gun ban upholds the deliberative process. That is a positional case. I have told you a statement of advocacy, something that I affirm, something that I believe to be true, and now all of my arguments in the contention level are going to link back to that conception. My framework is going to revolve around that conception, right? So that's what positional debating means. It means that you identify a statement of personal truth, a statement of belief, and you work from there. So, couple things that I want to mention before we wrap up, in terms of sort of how do you do it and why is it good. Okay, why is it good? Couple main reasons for this. Number one, it means that you can lose individual arguments in the round, but still win the round itself so long as you win the position. What I mean by that is, in any debate round, there will always be some arguments you don't get to, some arguments you undercover, some arguments you don't deal with very well, right? But if you win the overall position to be true, then you only need to win one argument that links to that position in order to win the round. So, for example, if I am running this position I was just talking about democratic deliberation, and you make a bunch of answers about how gun bans are bad or gun bans don't work or whatever, right? If I still win that there is something inherent to a gun ban that is going to promote deliberation, then I can take out a lot of those responses, because those responses might be true of one specific part of my advocacy, but might not take out my entire advocacy. So if you win the position, you can win the round a lot more easily. So it gives you sort of a way to frame the entire round. The second thing is it allows you to use a problem-solution format for arguments. In other words, for every contention level argument, you can say,